And I'm back with another devlog for that one game.
Reminds me of Madness Combat. This looks like thing.
In short, you kill stuff and it's supposed to be cool, but also set in a "this is where I post from" setting. I come with a bunch of new additions, which you can as always try out for yourself for free on my itch.io page. The only issue being that it's protected by a password, which you will find somewhere in this video. Or you could also beg for it in the comments. Anyway, if you saw the last devlog, then you know it kinda went nuts. This was the first time a video I actually cared about blew up. And I also received a bunch of comments and suggestions. Some of these suggestions I already completed, some were put in the to-do list, and some, well, yeah. When discussing melee combat, some people mentioned that it would be good to have an ability to stun enemies. Implementing it was pretty easy. Enemies have a stun chance, which is increased every time they receive melee damage. Every received attack, the enemy rolls for a random number, and if it falls under the stun chance, a stun is performed. Also, attacking the enemy when they don't remember you has a 100% chance of stunning them. On the topic of melee weapons, another requested feature was throwing. Now, if you hold the drop weapon key, you will start aiming, and on release, the weapon will be thrown. But this mechanic has more depth to it than just damaging an enemy. First of all, the thrown weapon will not stop looking for damage targets until it hits a solid surface. So it is possible to bounce it off one enemy to hit another, and with each bounce, the damage increases a bit. Throwing can also stun enemies with double the chance of a regular attack. In the future, I will also make it so blade weapons will have a chance to stick to enemies. So imagine throwing a knife and it like lodges inside of their head and they get stunned and bleed out, and it's kinda cool. But besides that, melee weapons need to be improved in general. Blocking should now work properly, and changing states is faster now, as in you can immediately attack after a successful parry, or after blocking a hit, without having to wait for a recovery animation to finish. And weapon punching was also upgraded a bit. You can now finally punch breakable objects, so it's much more useful now, maybe even a bit too much. All of this should make playing with melee weapons a bit of a smoother experience, and I will continue to improve it, making this option more and more viable. And yes, maybe I will someday add the Spoon of Undeath. Another change that wasn't requested directly, but is a result of people having issues with the game being in a password-protected archive. Turns out, antiviruses can't see into encrypted archives, which makes sense if you consider that it was encrypted using AES-256. Also, a surprising amount of people don't even have any sort of archive software installed. I was getting questions like, "I can't use the password," and the solution was always to download either 7-zip or WinRAR. So I ended up moving the password protection from the archive into the game itself. And there is even a way to bypass the screen, if you think for 5 seconds. One person asked if there will be some sort of a zombie or an arena mode. And yes, I already even started collecting ideas for it. The plan is to not have it be just a whole separate thing that doesn't provide you with any value besides killing time and fighting your friends for top 1 on the leaderboard. It will still of course have this stuff in it, but on top of that, this will also be a place where you can unlock new cosmetics, weapons and even weapon attachments to later use in the main campaign. I'm very excited myself to start working on it, because while I do want to make cool levels with a hopefully interesting story, at the same time I'm a baboon that likes to grind a bit to see some shiny numbers go up. Or arcade modes, if you may. I have played Cookie Clicker and ruined the game by using an auto golden cookie collector, so I know what I'm talking about. Some of y'all assume that this game is as easy to run as a Flash game, which is fair, it does look relatively simple, but this is not Flash, resulting in people with weak-ass GPUs that don't support Vulkan not being able to run the game. And I was in the same boat some time ago, because I had a GT 1030, which again does not support Vulkan. That's why the first build of the game was running on OpenGL. And one of the solutions would be to change the driver to DirectX 12. This wasn't really possible until Godot 4.4 came out. And well, yeah, the game can now boot in DirectX 12 if your GPU doesn't support Vulkan, but it doesn't mean the game will run smoothly. First of all, its implementation is still rough around the edges and may introduce some visual bugs. And secondly, by definition, if your GPU didn't support Vulkan in the first place, then it is pretty weak, meaning it will not be able to run the game at any playable FPS. And I have personally even tested all of this, since I recently got a laptop with Intel graphics on it. And like I said, even though the game has boot up, the FPS is unplayable. There isn't really anything I can do to change that, unless I wanna roll back to the game's visuals to how they looked in public build 1. And even then, the FPS wasn't that high. So sorry Potato Bros, you should look into upgrading. Some okay GPUs don't cost that much really. And now for the opposite side of suggestions. I want you all to understand that I'm not making a 2D ready or not here. Yes, it's brutal and shit, but no, I will not add enemies begging for mercy or gun jamming. The game is supposed to be relatively arcade-like, where closer to the end, the boss fights will look like something out of the Calamity mod. I'm the only person working on the game and I don't want to focus all my creativity on a single enemy type. There will be, and already are, other enemies, which I will talk about later in the video, so keep your eyes and ears open. With all this sudden attention, something happened that I really hoped for. Before, the ragdolls in the game were pretty janky. Their joints didn't have any angular limits, so the head would spin 360 degrees. Sometimes a ragdoll could disappear and lag the game to the point where shooting physics stopped working. And a lot more miscellaneous shit that I couldn't fix no matter how much I tried. But eventually, a savior had descended from the skies above and said to me, "Yo, I'm also making a 2D shooter game on Godot and had already gone through the same ragdoll issues as you. And I have a fix, a solution." The game in question is Urban Road, where one of the main points is weapon manipulation being relatively in-depth. Here you can eject with one key, insert with another, and perform other actions with your mouse wheel. Pumping a shotgun or using a bolt action is also manual, and as you can see, this game also has ragdolls, but their joints don't spin with no limits. Phil had spent a lot of time working on this, and in the end had made his custom pin joint 2D script, which he shared with me, as well as some other tips on how to keep ragdolls from going nuts. So now, there's finally a working angular limit on the joints. Even though it already exists in regular Godot, no matter what you do, it doesn't work. And I don't think it ever fucking did since this feature was added. If you want to see more of his game and follow the development, you can find all of Phil's links in the description. At this point I was starting the work on the second level, and I wanted to bring some new weapons in. So far you have a weak pistol, a pretty strong revolver, and 2 melee weapons. So I wanted to add something in between. First on the line was a knife called RFB2, which has pretty fast and weak attacks, but the upside is that it can apply bleeding. Yes, with this knife I have also added the mechanics of status effects. So far there's only bleeding and heavy bleeding. The player can remove them by using a health kit. And the only way of applying them right now is using either the knife or the crowbar. I don't plan on making bullet wounds have a bleed chance like in Tarkov. As for fire rounds, there is also a new addition, the motherfucking PM9 Evil Gun. A first ever SMG in MDT. There isn't much to it because it's basically an automatic M9. Even though it's a meme, it fits pretty well into the whole scout theme, as it is a homemade gun. Also, there is finally a way to get a shotgun in the main campaign. Previously the only way was to spawn it using the debug features, or it could be found in the test levels. I won't show you directly where to get it, but a trailer for Supporter Build 3 does have a pretty blatant hint. And you might be wondering, what are supporter builds? There are monthly builds that are only available for my supporters on Boosty. Boosty is pretty much the same as Patreon, but you can pay with both Russian and foreign cards. Same goes for withdrawing. I don't have to do 5 trillion currency conversions to receive only 5% of that money in the end. By subscribing, you gain access to game updates sooner, so if you don't want to pay, then you can just wait for the next public build, like this one. You also get a special role in my Discord server and access to an exclusive chat where I frequently show behind the scenes content. The link to my Boosty page and the Discord server will be in the description. Another mechanic introduced in this update is the armor system. It works kinda like in Tarkov, but with the equation being much more simpler. The penetration chance is determined by a maximum level gap of 10. So for example, if an armor piece has armor level 20 and it gets hit with a bullet with level 10, then the penetration chance is 0. If the bullet is level 15, 50%, and level 20 is 100%. Simple stuff. If the bullet doesn't penetrate, then it will deal a bit of blunt damage, and the armor piece will lose some health too. This will eventually break the armor, allowing the bullets to hit the target with no resistance. But even if a bullet penetrated, its damage is still reduced a bit. For example, a revolver one-shots an unprotected head, but if the head is protected by a welding mask, even though the bullet still penetrates, it now takes 2 shots to kill an enemy instead of 1. To test these formulas, I made a scene where you can input armor stats, ammo stats, and enemy's health to see how many shots it will take to kill it if the armor were to be penetrated all the time, never penetrated, or by random chance via the bullet penetration level. Armor pieces corpses also don't cover the entire body part. Again, it's not as complex as in Tarkov, where it's made out of actual hitboxes. Here, it uses the same logic as the gore system, mentioned in the previous devlog. So it's basically a range of degrees. So far, the only way for the player to equip armor is through the cosmetic debug menu, but level 2 already has enemies wearing it. Currently, there are 6 armor pieces: guard plate carrier and helmet, welding mask, scrap dragon skin armor, scrap mask, and steel plate vest. The last 2 are worn by a new humanoid unit, which I will talk about soon. As the development goes on, I keep running into problems with performance. So this update comes with a new set of optimization techniques. Let's start with giving the player more control over the settings. Object limits are limits for different types of nodes, stuff like blood decals, corpses, shells, etc. Previously, these limits had already existed in the game, but they were not exposed for the player to change. This isn't the case now, so if you go into settings, then you will be able to either select an object limit preset or change every single limit separately, all the way to the point where every limit can be set to a value of 1. But seeing corpses disappear right away doesn't look so good, so I had to make different settings for corpse cleanup. Off-screen will immediately delete a corpse if all of its body parts are, well, outside the player's view. This is probably the most elegant solution, as you will never notice the corpses disappearing. On screen we'll start old corpses first and then delete them, which is pretty smooth, so you don't really notice it during gameplay. And none is just unlimited corpses. Later, when making the second level, I ran into an issue of my decal mask not working anymore. Turns out I literally exceeded the image size limit, but for you to understand why that is a bit comical, I gotta explain how the image mask generation works. It all starts with the style map that has 3 different colors, where green corresponds to the background layer and blue to the foreground. Red is just nothing. So to make a mask, I have to manually paint over areas which I consider to be background and foreground. After that, during the level loading process, a script firstly makes an empty image and then loops to every single tile map cell, checking its color, and if the color corresponds to the required layer, makes a white pixel. If not, makes a transparent pixel. After that is done, the resulting image gets applied to the mask, which is aspired to D, and all the decals are created as children of this mask. I came up with the solution relatively early into development, and even though it works fine, my coding skills were a bit weaker back then, and as such the script is written a bit foolish, if you may. The first main issue is that this loop was being done 2 times, with the code not having much difference at all, and in programming it is usually a bad idea to have repeated code. So now the loop is being done once and doesn't look for a specific color anymore, but responds to green and blue colors right away, making pixels in the corresponding images. The next part is the one why I ran into that image size limit before. Because my tiles are 32 by 32 pixels, I was literally multiplying the resulting image's size by 32, which bloats the file's size to insane numbers. My masks used to weigh around 500 megabytes per layer, so a whole gigabyte if combined. Now, 1 pixel on the image corresponds to 1 tile. You can see how big the size difference is here. And instead, the sprite itself gets rescaled, not the image texture. Also, another thing I changed to reduce the file size even more is changing the file format. Before, it was RGBA8, which is your standard PNG image format that supports billions, gazillions of different colors. But I don't need color here, I only use white and transparent. So I changed the image format to LA8, which stands for Luminance Alpha 8, which is literally what I need. I have my luminance and I have my alpha, nothing more. In theory, all of this should boost the loading times a bit, but personally I didn't notice any difference on my system. Now let's talk about modding. Since this game is made on Godot, decompiling it and making changes is really easy. One person already did that, replacing the player sprites with their own, but I wanna make actual tools that would help both modders and me when we want to add some new content. Especially that type of content that I guess I can call repeatable. Repeatable content is stuff that has one structure on all of the instances with a couple of variables that you can change. For example, cosmetics. The only variables you change is its sprite, info like name, description and so on, and maybe additional stats like armor. And another example is weapons. When creating a new weapon, you have to repeat the same actions every time. Creating the folder structure, creating weapon stats, creating a new inherited scene and other additional scenes, then referencing those scenes in the stats resource. It's a shit ton of repeatable work you have to do to even get started. So the obvious solution is automation. I have made this editor tool that allows you to easily create a base for a new item. So far it only has weapon creation in it, but I will add other resources to it, like cosmetics. Here you can change basic info, select your weapon type, with some special settings depending on the type, like is it a pump shotgun or is it a revolver. Then you can choose to create additional files and select your ammo type. and after you hit create, it automatically creates all the necessary folders for you, then sets all the references to scenes in the weapon stats file, and also depending on what weapon type you have chosen, it will make a copy of a template weapon of the same type. So for example, if you have created an assault rifle, it will create a copy of Galil. If it is a shotgun, then it's R870, and so on. And done! The weapon is already usable in game. This tool still has a lot of stuff missing, but I will keep working on it from time to time. Also, I have made an additional small tool that creates a hotbar preview scene out of a sprite, and again automatically assigns it to the weapon stats file. I won't go into details on how to do all of this right now, but the most I will say is use this tool, that I will link in the description, to decompile the game. It's free and it's easy. Again, if you have more questions about this, then you can ask me in my Discord server. When most of the tools will be finished, I plan on making a full-ass tutorial series on how to mod every part of the game. At the same time as developing new mechanics, levels and enemies, I was also making new art for labs. Mostly props, but also some tiny amount of new tilesets. 90% of them are literally props from Tarkov's labs, and I did feel a bit shitty from the fact that I'm literally stealing prop ideas from another game. But if you think about it, it's not a big deal since all of these props do exist in real life. And Tarkov here plays a role of a gallery, where they get used in actual scenes that I can explore. And don't worry, not all labs' contents will be taken from Tarkov, I do have some ideas of my own. Also, as you might have noticed, the doors now finally have custom sprites, with some of them having glass panels you can shoot through, as well as having an actual animation for opening and closing. I tried achieving a pseudo 3D look with them, and while it does look janky if you slow it down, during normal gameplay it's not noticeable at all. After that, I experimented with parallax backgrounds. The starting area where you learn how to climb ladders and jump is supposed to be a big-ass storage warehouse, but the background made it look like it's a relatively small room. So in order to make it look deeper, I made this parallax thingy, and while making it I had to optimize some stuff, because as you can imagine, rendering a lot of objects at one time is pretty demanding. The easiest part was putting all of these props under a canvas group. The canvas group node grabs all of its children and puts them into a single draw code, instead of a billion small ones. So it is necessary if you want to have a lot of sprites on your screen. Then, to make the wall and the pillars, I initially tried using tile maps, as these things did come from a tileset. But after testing it on a weaker system, it turned out that the tile map part of this parallax background was eating a shit ton of FPS. So I resorted to extracting the needed parts of the tilesets into separate sprites, and then just tiling them in Godot, once again putting them inside of a canvas group. The result is not final, but I think it already does convey a sense of depth. And now, finally, the part I was teasing this whole video. New enemies. They are not really anything crazy, but they are different from regular humanoids. First on the line is the ceiling turret, inspired by the same thing from Black Mesa. The AI is pretty simple, you walk into its range, and if it has direct line of sight to you, then it will start firing. It will spray you down pretty quick, but it isn't invulnerable. I started making the armor system while working on this enemy, because it is metallic, and I wanted some bullets to deal less damage to it than others. So in the end, when the turret is hidden, you can only shoot its lead, and so far the only bullet that can actually penetrate and deal significant damage is 5.56. Your best bet would be to shoot the gun itself. As its health goes down, it will start lagging when rotating, and if it gets even lower, then it will start misfiring sometimes. Better off shooting it with a revolver, as 357 has a high penetration level, but even 9mm eventually can make this thing explode. But the star of the show is definitely the shield unit. It is based on the humanoid AI, but it doesn't shoot you. Instead, this guy will put his shield down in front of you, making other humanoids with guns cover behind him. And he isn't all about defense. In order to make his attack decision logic, I had to watch a couple videos talking about how Dark Souls AI works, and the simplified answer is that the enemy has a list of attacks, each attack having a weight value, which changes depending on different circumstances. The higher the weight, the more chance the enemy is gonna randomly choose this attack. And in order to visualize these weights, I used this pie chart that this person made. So currently the shield unit has 3 attacks. Charge, that can only trigger from a certain distance and has less chance the more enemies are covering behind his shield. Shield Bash is a default attack when the player is standing up close, and Punch is similar to Shield Bash, but has more damage and its chance gets increased the more you hit his shield. All of these attacks can be parried, again making melee weapons have actual usage. Also, you might have noticed his shield has a glass panel, and if you remember what I talked about earlier in this video, then you know what that means. While his punch and shield bash attacks can be dodged if you just step back, the charge attack does seem inescapable if you can't parry it. And because the player doesn't have a dash or a double jump ability yet, I had to come up with a way to launch the player up. First idea would be jump pads, but then it would be strange if the jump pads didn't work on enemies. So eventually I came up with the idea of pulleys, or ziplines if you wanna call them that. Yellow ones launch you up and you let go of them automatically, while the blue ones are used to just hang on them. Basic hanging video game logic does apply here, meaning your velocity does matter when jumping. Most of these new features are present in the new level, and I won't be talking about this level at all here because it would be kinda boring, and I want you to experience it for yourself. I wanna say thank you for everyone who commented, liked, or at least even watched my last devlog. As I said in the beginning, this is the first time in my life I received so much attention and support for what I'm doing. If you think that I achieved all of this in a relatively short time, then you're wrong. Because I've been doing YouTube since I was 9, and I will become 21 this year. I was probably even younger when it comes to trying to make games. So I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, you will eventually achieve whatever you want. For some people 2024 was a shitty year, but not for me. 2025 on the other hand had really started on the wrong foot. I posted the last devlog while being in the worst emotional state I had ever been in my life before. But I never thought of ceasing the development of this game. I don't study, I don't really work anywhere, so this is my whole life, and I wouldn't want it to be any other way. Once again, join our Discord server, all the links are in description. And special thanks to all my Boosty supporters: Ian Gregory, I Can't Stop Suffer, Dick Sucker, The Wolfman, 38 Forger, and Harry.